let's get into it. So, Blood Meridian is a book by Cormac McCarthy. I first heard about this book because I liked the movie The Road, and I kind of looked into that. I found out who wrote that, and this was another thing that I saw a lot online talked about, this book. So I looked into it, bought it a long time ago. It took me a while to get into actually reading it until I took a vacation, but I'm glad I did. It was quite an interesting adventure into literary scholarship, let's say. So this movie, yeah, I'm probably going to say that a bunch of times because who reads books anymore? But the novel begins talking about our main character, which is called the Kid. Kind of goes over his early life a little bit, which is basically just born to in Tennessee. They talk about he was born under a meteor shower, similar to Warhammer with Sigmar, but I'm sure that means something. And I think that is a hint to his final, what his final conclusion in the end of the book by the hint in the beginning about him being born under a meteor shower, or whatever. And the book basically starts with him trying to find his way. Something I kind of really like about this book is it feels like a video game in a weird way. I saw some things online comparing it to Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a game I just bought. I haven't played yet, but reading this book is kind of getting me pumped for it. To me, it reminded me of playing a little bit of this game called Mount and Blade. Not Mountain Blade, Mount and Blade. Because of the way that you have these little... That it's like a big world built up and you play a small character and these things kind of happening around you. So the way that the kid is kind of brought into these other characters and into these different groups that he joins reminds me a lot of you playing a video game, this video game character and trying to get started, in the beginning of a game. And so he's introduced to the judge in the beginning of the book when he's at some small town somewhere. There's a lot of traveling in this book, so I'm going to forget the names of any of these places they go to, but he's in some small town, and he's at some, preacher's tent or something, and he's doing, some sermon, and the judge kind of just stands up in the middle of that and accuses this guy of, fornicating with children and goats and stuff like that. And immediately whips the crowd up against him and turns, and they start attacking this preacher. As our first little clue of who this guy is, kind of, and what he's role he's going to play in this book. The kid gets out of there. He has a violent encounter with the bartender. We get our first taste of gore in the book, where he pops out a guy's eyeball or something like that. They kind of explain it in a little bit of detail. The gore, as we get into it, I guess I'll try to explain some more of the gore parts. But the gore, I didn't, like I said, the book is supposed to be pretty gory, but I didn't find it that gory. I found decent. I like the action and stuff in it. That kept me more interested than just the J.R.R. Tolkien parts where it's he's just describing wilderness. But maybe I could use more. Maybe I'm just too desensitized nowadays. I don't know. But the kid moves on until he eventually gets hooked up with a band of kind of militia. It's kind of a group of people. I guess they're called what? Irregulars? Yeah, they're kind of being paid to It seems in the book they're being paid to, because the war ended or something like that with Mexico, but there's still Indian bands doing stuff, so they're being paid to kind of take and fight the Indians and protect American interests and that kind of stuff, even though they pulled out. And they just kind of gear up and move across the border into Mexico, and from there, it basically, because he's with a band of ex military guys too, to some extent. So you're all right, kind of in a video game, right? You join up with a group, and you're okay, well, we'll see what happens here, and you think you're about to get started on a big adventure, and they get immediately all killed. And it's very interesting the way they describe it in the book, because they describe Comanche lancers, and when I think of the West a lot, you think a lot of you think a lot of like cowboys and Indians. You don't think about the term lancer a lot, and thinking about that, it's sorry, I gotta go check. What am I looking at? I think about that. I think about like Indians with just giant sticks or something like that. But another imagery you get of like armored Indians, and they kind of do allude to that a little bit because they make that some of them have like armor of like conquistadors or some shit like that. And so most of them get killed. The kid, of course, like somehow lives through this, which is like some of them do, and they meet up after their slaughter and whatnot, and like they get like slaughtered and stuff, but they choose kind of what they describe and what they don't. He made a point of describing that like the natives like sodomizing some of the dead, but I don't entirely know if they meant like butt sodomize or if there's another term for that word that they're really talking about of just like stabbing it or something, but whatever. And then from there, the book kind of just goes on with this kind of core group of survivors that's left. They move on from town to town and stuff like that. They start like picking up. Well, from here, they kind of go from town to town because they're like ravaged and they're looking for something to do or for somewhere to go. And I think they get like thrown in jail or something like that. But they eventually get picked up by another person, Glanton. So like, going back to like Mountain Blade or something like that. You feel like these are like party leaders that are just picking up troops or whatever. And so this perspective we're getting is like from like the lowest level troop, who keeps getting picked up but lost in battles and that kind of stuff, and but hasn't died. And so in this party that he gets brought into, it's a little bit more serious and a little bit more violent. And he's, the judge was in the last party, but now Tobin, and there's a guy called Toadvine. There's some other characters too. There's a black guy that used the N-word, and Bob Smith or something like that. But they've got some other characters that these are like kind of our core group of characters that survived from the Comanche attack that are going to be in Glanton's band here. That we're going to get most of the story of them kind of going around Texas and Mexico and what they do. And this is the bulk of the story from this point. And as they kind of begin, they're kind of wounded, they just got like slaughtered. So I forget really what happens when they first set out. Because from this point on, it's kind of like they're going from town to town and they're looking for Indians and stuff like that. They're scalping, they're paid to scalp and kill like the bad Native Americans, but they kind of just move along to just killing like whoever. And this is where they kind of describe some of the violence and that kind of stuff. But moving on from there, like during this whole part, they have different moments where they just kind of like, after doing some of this crazy stuff, sit and talk. And you get some speeches by the judge. You get some speeches by Tobin and Toadvine and whatnot. And one interesting story we get is kind of because they talk about the judge and how he is some weird kind of person that everybody in the camp has met or in the party's met before getting into the party, which is like another little sign that we get that the judge might be something supernatural or might represent something else. So when Tobin is kind of explaining to the kid about the first time he met him, he has this whole story about it's not this one. Hold on, I'm looking for it in the book because I want to read like a little bit about it. Okay. And so this story he's telling about the judge is about, because weird enough, like how do you get all this stuff about the judge to make sense and to fit together? It's about how he was part of, I guess, this party before. He was part of a different party before. I guess this party. Yeah, and which is, again, confusing because how can the judge be like everywhere? And they met him when they were being chased by Indians one time, and they were out of like gunpowder. and they were going to get run down eventually. And they came across him in the middle of the desert, just sitting on like a giant boulder, just there waiting for them. And they kind of, like, you know, I guess that's supposed to be the thing, that he's like waiting for them. And they let him join their party, and they keep running on. And during this whole thing, we get this little crafting thing where he's kind of starts instructing them, and they flee to a river where they're able to collect like phosphor from something, and then they flee up a mountain where they're going to the volcano, which they're going for sulfur or something. So they're trying to, which they eventually move on to crafting their own gunpowder on top of this volcano. And then when the Indians finally when they make their last stand up there, they've got all of a sudden ammunition now to fight the Indians, and they kill them, all thanks to the judge. So from the book, this is a part in the book where Tobin is talking to the kid telling him about this whole event going down. Well, it would have brought tears to your eyes. All dead save me, he called. Have mercy on me. Todos muertos, todos, waving the shirt. God, it sent them yapping on the slope like dogs. And he turns to us, the judge, with that smile of his. He says, gentlemen, that was all he said. So I'm going to stop right there, too. What we're picking up here is they've just kind of made the gunpowder, and the Indians are coming towards them. So they decide to wave the white flag like they're surrendering, and instead they're going to. He had the pistol stuck in his belt at the back, and he drew them, one in each hand. And he is as either-handed as a spider. He can write with both hands at a time, and I've seen him do it. And he commenced to killing Indians. We needed no second invitation. God, it was butchery. At the first, we killed around dozen, and we did not let up. Before the last poor N-word reached the bottom of the slope, there was 58 of them lay slaughtered among the gravels. They just slid down the slope like chaff down a hopper. Some turned this way, some that, and they made a chain about the base of the mountain. We rested our rifle barrels on the brimstone, and we shot 9 more on the lava where they ran. It was a stand. What it was, Wagner's was laid, and last of them shot was a reckonable part of a mile from the muzzles of the guns, and that on a dead run. It was sharp shooting all around, and not a misfire in the batch. That was queer powder. The ex-priest turned and looked at the kid, and that was the judge. The first ever I saw him. He's a thing to study. The kid looked at Tobin. What's he a judge of? He said. What's he a judge of? What's he a judge of? Tobin glanced across the fire. Ah, lad, he said, hush now. The man will hear ye. He's ears like a fox. I think that's interesting. From what little snippets we get in there, right, of the judge, that he's willing to do like a fake surrender. He really enjoys killing people. I mean, it sure seems like, and that he set up this whole thing, and that he's also very good at it. Signs that we're getting more and more of that. I don't know. I think the judge might be a supernatural thing, because like they came out of nowhere in this guy's story to kind of set them up to create more, more violence in a devious way. It is very interesting there. So this is some of the little stories that we're getting of them kind of marauding across Mexico. There's another story about, they find a couple of them, but like peaceful Native American bands, and you're like, and they just like sneak up on them and like slaughter them all. And they go over detail of, there's one part in the book where, because they run through this like village in the middle of the night, when they say there's not even that much of them, like 20 something of them. And there's like 1,000 people in the village, I think, or like a couple hundred or something like that. But they run through on their horse in the middle of the night, just killing like anybody they can, burning whatever they can to, have the Indians run away, which of course the Indians are going to regroup and kill them anyway, so they can't be there forever. But some of the stuff they mentioned about like one of them, I forget which guy it was, but coming out of like one of the little wigwams or the little huts with like 2 babies in each hand, like by the legs, and just hits them on like boulders and like explodes them and stuff like that they talk about. And a lot of talking about scalping and that kind of stuff, because they get, kind of like the video game aspect, getting paid per scalp. And a part of that is it doesn't matter what kind of scalp they get. From this, I think from that part, that village too, we see some of the other twisted shit about the judge, which is like he kind of adopts a small boy there and like keeps the boy with him or whatever the whole time, and you're kind of getting weird pedo vibes from all that. And then one day, it's like when they come across a village where they're getting paid for scalps, he like, there's just nothing. The next morning, the boy's dead and he's scalped, and it's like, is this guy just keeping the kid just to like fuck with him and then kill him when like he was gonna get the money for the scalp? I don't know, weird shit like that. And that's a big part of the book, kind of going to that, explaining all these different parts in the Southwest. All this stuff about, like, how hot, my God, the heat down there. It sounds like hell on earth itself. I mean, that's good to kind of get you in the mood, really explain it to you. You kind of see it in your mind's eye and, you know, describing a lot of, like, what the nights were like down there and stuff. And it's neat. Another little bit I think I'm going to read for you, too, right now is... where did I put it? This other little bit about the judge as well, as it was after like I think it was after a different defeat they had or something like that, but they're running through the mountains and they're going around the mountains and they're looking for another place to go, but the kid is like observing the judge doing all this weird stuff. He likes to kind of document the world, which is interesting because they make plenty of times mention in the book that like the judge is the most educated of them, can speak different tongues, and he has like this book that he keeps with him where he like draws everything and like pictographs everything and writes everything down and describes all the different natures and things of the world. And in this, it says, the judge placed his hands on the ground. He looked at his inquisitor. In this part, they're asking the judge, like, what are you doing? You know, this cat is going to jump in my lap. Stop it, Chunks. Asking what he's doing with it, and he's explaining himself to, like, Toadvine and the kid and whatnot. So, the judge placed his hand on the ground, or his hands on the ground. He looked at his inquisitor. This is my claim, he said, and yet everywhere upon it are pockets of autonomous life. Autonomous. In order for it to be mine, nothing must be permitted to occur upon it save by my dispensation. Big sign, something right there. Toadvine sat with his boots crossed before the fire. No man can acquaint himself with everything on earth, he said. The judge tilted his great head. The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden lies in mystery and fear. Superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode the deed of his life. But the man who sets himself the task of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will by the decision alone have taken charge of the world, and it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. I don't see... This is somebody talking back to him. I don't see what that has to do with catching birds. The freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos. That'd be a hell of a zoo. The judge smiled. Yes, he said, even so. So there, an interesting little insight into the judge about his, like, I don't know, his kind of look upon life itself, you know, autonomous, the way he describes autonomy and freedom and that kind of stuff, kind of seems like a sociopath or something like that. Because what we get a lot in this book is him describing him, or not him describing him, but having him do things about like manipulating people and getting people to kind of do, it seems like to do what he wants, or just manipulating people to do stuff. Because it seems like, as they said in the book, that everybody's met him before they got into this party. So it's like, it makes you wonder, did he all manipulate them to all get there? Did he orchestrate this whole like meeting of this party of people so they could go do these atrocities to like Indians and stuff? And it makes you wonder. But so after that big part of the book, we move on to the next part. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe not really the climax, but kind of like the next big chunk where things happen is they go back into the U.S. territory and they get met up with a that's like a ferry system. The Colorado River, Yuma, Arizona. Yeah. So they meet this guy who runs a ferry there, and they kind of move in to help him. And what they eventually do is, because the ferry looks like a good idea, is they eventually set up a whole system to kind of take over the ferry, and they orchestrate a Native American attack on the ferry. And they got like this howitzer and these guns set up. So what they do is, with the Native Americans, they say that they're going to have them attack on a certain day, and they're going to help them so they can take over the fort and kind of share the fort together. Instead, what they decide to do is, when the Native Americans attack, slaughter the Native Americans because they know exactly where they're coming from, and then just kind of strong-arm the guy who runs the ferry into them taking over. Which he's a doctor, the guy who owns the ferry. And then they basically just go upon thieving and doing like terrible shit to people trying to get across the ferry. They'd rob them, take women, and do all this kind of terrible crap. In this part of the book, while that's going on, they send John Brown out to a different town, and they have some other stuff go on where people, it seems like one of them is getting like kidnapped or caught up with the law in another town, so Glanton has to go out to get them. And there's not really a lot that really happens there, other than this John Brown character kind of going back and forth and doing kind of some other stuff, which is interesting enough because it makes it feel like, more real life. Like these are, to me, this, which I think it is, a lot of it felt like kind of a story of a real party of dudes, maybe dramatized and stuff like that. And I think he did actually get this kind of inspiration of the story from a real group of people who did this kind of crazy crap. And so as that happens, they go out to look for John Brown. He disappears for a while. He comes back. Clinton comes back, and then they eventually, while they're holed up in this ferry operation that they're running, the Indians come back, which, after being gunned down, good. And they attack back, and they start slaughtering all the people in the fort. From there, we only get a couple left, a couple people that survive that who get out. I haven't mentioned the imbecile, but that's another very interesting part. So before this, talking about who gets out of this fort alive, there's this character before this that was introduced called the imbecile, with this other dude who was I don't know, using this retarded kid as a sideshow thing, and he was they describe how he's eating feces and doing all this nasty crap or whatnot, and the judge kind of takes a weird kind of fascination with him. Maybe, like I said, with the diddling stuff, he's doing stuff to him or not. I don't know, but it's a weird kind of sidekick for him, because they describe the judge as being a giant white hairless man, kind of like a giant baby, but a man baby or something like that. And so the judge, with his friend of this imbecile, weird, tiny retard thing, they get out of the fort alive, together. Very strangely, because the way they describe it is, in the judge's room, he was with the imbecile and a little girl when the Native Americans came. And also in the room, he had the howitzer. And so he said, the way they described in the book is he got out of the fort because he ran down the Indians or whatever. When the Indians came to his room, he just had the bazooka or the cannon in his arm because he was that big, and a cigar, and he was about to blow it at them, but they had ran away. So he just I guess scared them away enough with that to where he could run away from the fort. And of course we get the kid who survives, and Tobin, the ex-priest. They kind of run away a little bit together. The kid gets takes an arrow to the knee, now to the leg, and we kind of fall into the last part of the book here a little bit, which is this weird kind of chase between the judge and the kid, because they just got attacked by the Indians or whatever. So the kid gets chased down a little bit more, but he eventually loses them, in like a Revenant kind of scene where he's like in the woods by himself and eventually finds like a horse that belonged to somebody who else was killed but can like wrangle it, and then he starts making off on his own until he meets up with some other people or like one other person who was from there. And they meet up with I think it was Toadvine at this like watering hole where the judge comes with the imbecile. It's just like him and the imbecile, and I think they're just naked or something like that, where he's just got some straps of like straps of fur or whatever to him. But and so what happens there is they start getting into this whole thing where he offers, because the one thing he does have is like a bunch of gold coins, and so he offers Toadvine like $300 for his hat or something like that. Toadvine doesn't really want to give it to him, but then eventually like acquiesces and gives it to him. And then he starts trying to haggle with the kid for his gun, and the kid is the only one who has a weapon at this point. The kid doesn't want to give it up, and so it gets a little bit more and more tense until you're kind of like, oh, is like the judge going to kill this kid for the gun or whatever? And he says a bunch of crap to him. Until the kid eventually, like him and Tobin, like leave the judge there. They, it's kind of in their minds. They think that the judge is going to kill Toadvine, and they come across John Brown, who they thought was like already dead or whatever, from the earlier thing, where Glanton went to look for him, but he wasn't actually dead, and they kind of like telling him about everything that happened, but he still chose to go back the way they were coming from, and he runs into the judge or whatever. And then, oh my God, Chunks. And so later down the line, like, as they're still like trying to get away, the judge is kind of hunting them down now because he has like the horse and the guns from John Brown, kind of alluding to the fact that like, oh, so did the judge kill him? Like the judge is just on a blood path or whatever, and but he's still got the imbecile with him and all this kind of stuff. And then we get to a point where they're at like a bone graveyard, because near the watering holes, they mentioned that there's more and more like animal carcass and that kind of stuff because the animal's looking for the water. All right, Chunks, there's no room for you up here. And during this chase, they kind of like hunker down. Yeah, here, Chunks. They kind of hunker down. Get out. And set up like a little, like, I don't know, hide. Set up like a little trap. And they're going to like shoot the judge. And the priest keeps telling him like, just, to like do it. But the kid, for some reason, never like shoots him. The judge is, of course, speaking mad shit in weird judge-like ways. The judge goes one way, comes back, even now, like, to give him like a couple chances to shoot him, and doesn't. And so they eventually move on, and they get to a town, and the kid and Tobin kind of get separated. You never really find out what happened to Tobin. And the kid gets sent to jail, or kidnapped, and not kidnapped, but arrested, brought to jail, to where the judge finds him in jail and told like the authorities that everything that happened with the gang was all like his responsibility or something like that. So that he starts, he's gonna get like hung or whatever for it. To which a weird part of this too is that he like tells the authorities about a bunch of gold or like silver or money that they have stored somewhere, and so they just like let him go after that. He just gets acquitted for that for some reason. He's like, hey, but gold. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's how it worked back then. And then the book kind of just does a couple time jumps. It shows the kid kind of grow up, doing like other kind of things and these other kind of events in his life. The weirder one being kind of forced to like kill a kid, where it was like a cattle rustling group or whatever, and there was a bunch of kids who were at their camp or whatever, and one of them kept like threatening. Oh no! Well, before that, anyway. Oh no! That's not yet. But keep like threatening him or whatever. One of them keeps calling him a liar and kind of like makes him like shoot the kid or whatever. And he didn't really want to do it, but I don't know what's that really about. I think that's trying to say something about you can't really run away from, I don't know, conflict. But then we get to the end of the book, which is the kid going to, I think, Los Angeles, actually. And there he sees, I think it was Toadvine and John Brown or something like that, hung. Let's see. Or the San Diego. Excuse me. No, that was San Diego when he got his. I'm sorry, where he got his like wounds healed, which is a weird kind of. He just goes to San Diego. He gets to a doctor, and then he has like visions of the judge and stuff like that when he's under the ether. There, he sees Toadvine and David Brown were David Brown were hung for their crimes or whatever. So he sees that they're dead. But anyway, back to the end of the book. He's in Fort Griffin in Texas. And he's an older man. He's like in his 40s. He's now referred to as the man, and he runs into the judge one last time. And it's a weird little it's a weird little thing where he's like at a saloon, and in the saloon, there's a dancing bear. It's up on stage. It's weird. I mean, I think the whole book is kind of sad, but so up on stage they have like this dancing bear and this little girl with like a crank organ or something. And the bear is dancing or whatever, until somebody in the audience like pulls out their gun and shoots the bear for some reason. It's like a drunk guy who just shoots the bear for some reason. And they describe the bear like slowly dying. He like shoots the bear a couple times, and like the little girl is like crying and like holding its head, and it's like dying and bleeding everywhere. And some guy wants to like buy the pelt and whatever. And the judge and the kids see this, and I think this is supposed to be symbolic of something, but here's another little thing I'm going to read from the end of the book, which I think does speak a lot to that. The judge arched his brow. "Did you post witness," he said, "to report to you on the continuing existence of those places once you'd quit them? That's crazy." "It is? Or is it? Where is yesterday? Where is Glanton and Brown, and where is the priest?" He leaned closer. "Where is Shelby, whom you left to the mercies of Elias in the desert, and where is Tate, whom you abandoned in the mountains? Where are the ladies, the fair and tender ladies with whom you danced at the governor's ball when you were a hero anointed with the blood of the enemies of the republic you'd elected to defend? And where is the fiddler, and where is the dance? I guess you can tell me. I tell you this, as war becomes dishonored and its nobility called into question, those honorable men who recognize the sanctity of blood will become excluded from the dance, which is the warrior's right, and thereby will the dance become a false dance, and the dancers false dancers, and yet there will be one there always who is a true dancer. And can you guess who that might be? You ain't nothing. You speak truer than you know. So in this, you speak truer than you know, but I will tell you, only that man who has offered himself entire to the blood of war, who has been to the floor of the pit and seen horror in the round, and learned at last that it speaks to his inmost heart, only that man can dance. Even a dumb animal can dance. The judge set the bottle on the bar. "Hear me, man," he said. "There is room on the stage for one beast, and one alone. All others are destined for a night that is eternal and without name. One by one they will step down into the darkness before the footlamps. Bears that dance, bears that don't." Interesting. And so we kind of get to the last part of the book, which is left up to your interpretation, where it's about the kid who is now the man. He goes into an outhouse. Yes, Chunks. And in the outhouse, he is faced with the naked judge, who the last things they mention is just he embraces him against his flesh or whatever. And the last thing we are kind of given clue of is that there's a man who looks in the outhouse later, and his only lines are "Good God Almighty" to whatever he sees in there. And the book ends kind of with the judge fiddling and dancing in the bar, whatever, with all the prostitutes and the drunkards and the people or whatnot, which is interesting, kind of what I think the judge is supposed to be. And before I kind of get into breaking down what I think the book is supposed to mean, I'll go into the epilogue a little bit as well, because in the epilogue is basically just the author kind of describing the process of the phone post line guy, the guy going out down the country, digging the holes for the phone posts to go in, and he kind of just describes that in a way of like, I don't know, whimsy, I guess I would say, whimsy. What it's supposed to, I think, represent in the epilogue is kind of the, I don't know, not the destruction of the earth, but the destruction of like beauty, or this like nice kind of order that nature has given us in that terms, and kind of what man is doing to it. And to kind of break down, to go fully into it and break down what I think the entire book kind of is supposed to be, I think the judge is supposed to be, I think it's too simplistic to say he's just supposed to be the devil. I think he's kind of supposed to be like the representation of like violence, or I don't know, something like that. He's supposed to be the representation, I think, of, okay, good evidence that he's supposed to be the devil. The fiddling, who fiddles? The devil fiddles. So the fiddling, all the violent stuff, the weird, like, the stuff with the kids, killing people, not feeling bad about anything he's doing, using people to commit violence and that kind of stuff, and manipulating people to do whatever he wants without caring if it's right or wrong and that kind of stuff, makes me think that the fact that he's able to meet all these people, bring them together somehow, if that was his doing or not, or just meet them in the first place without, like, I don't know, does add like some mythological thing to it. What else could he, that, and the fact that the main character through most of the book is called the Kid, right? And what does the judge do to kids? It kind of seems like throughout the whole book, some weird shit. Interesting. They never really explain the judge ever tries anything with the kid like that. Because in the book, they don't really ever explain that much too with like the kid and how much, like what he does as much. Like they explain his first kind of violent thing, popping out the guy's eyeballs and him maybe shooting a couple people. But they never really show him going too crazy with the violence, like smashing the babies on rocks and stuff like that. That's more so the other people. Kind of seems at I don't know, not the direction of the judge, but... and of course, what happens to him once he becomes the man? He's killed by the judge. At least it seems like he's killed by the judge. And you get that, and you get like the weird connection the judge has with like the imbecile. It's weird. Even if he's not the devil, I would assume that he's supposed to take the form of like I don't know, man's violent nature, man's violent tendencies, or something like that. Like the whole speech he gives at the end about the dancing and the bear, and like he's kind of making the point that like you're either like we're all the bear, right? We're all this animal dancing, and it's like what difference does it really make other than if you're the one who's alive or not, right? Which is the violence, kind of. If you enact the violence, if you are the master of the violence, you're the one who gets to live, I guess, compared to the people who aren't. I don't know. I thought it was very interesting. Very dark. It makes you wonder about, like... it's the same reason why I like The Road, where it makes you wonder about human nature without, I think, kind of giving you too many answers and being too optimistic and saying, like, don't worry, everybody's good. No, I think the whole point of this book was supposed to be like, this is kind of being face to face with one of the nasty parts of man, of humankind itself, of the extreme violence and the extreme, like, because that's, as Jordan Peterson says, that's what we're all capable of, or something like that, and so you have to master that to become a master of yourself. It's a part of you, but I don't know. I've been taken. I guess maybe that's the judge taking to that part to the extreme, right? That part of human violence to the extreme, where it's either it's you or me, to the end. But I don't know. I would give it a. How am I supposed to rate it? This is the first book I've read since like, Where's Waldo? So I don't know, 7, 8, 8 out of 8 out of 8, 8 out of 10. I don't know. I'm looking forward to my brother reading it so he can tell me what the hell he thought about it. It does seem like a book I would be interested in reading again because I think it would make a lot more sense the second time through. But I'd be really excited to see a movie of this also made. Even though it's one of these books where it's like, how are they going to... I mean, okay, they made Lord of the Rings into a movie, so they could do it. Just get Peter Jackson. All right.